More than 1 million letters and packages pass through JFK Airport every day, making it an unexpected frontline in America's opioid crisis.
What's happening is the officers are reviewing X-ray images of the parcels and making decisions on whether or not the parcel should be open for physical exam.
Since 2016, one of the top priorities for border agents is to prevent illegal fentanyl from entering U.S. territory. 50 times stronger than heroin, this synthetic opioid is responsible for tens of thousands of fatal overdoses in America every year. With a thriving market on the dark web, it arrives in powder form or pressed into tablets, like these pills from India.
It's not an easy task interdicting something like fentanyl, a narcotic like fentanyl, in the male environment because it can come in very small quantities. It's not like heroin and cocaine where you're dealing with 5, 10, 15, 20 kilos. One of our most unique interdictions is that we encountered the musical greeting cards that you would purchase, and it has the little mechanism in there to play a song when you open them. As little as 2 or 3 or 4 grams secreted into envelopes into that particular part of the card.
Even a pinch can be deadly, so agents have had to adapt. They use laser technology to avoid coming in contact with dangerous substances. The facility now carries naloxone or Narcan, the opioid overdose reversal drug. Fentanyl was introduced to the U.S. market in the 60s as an anesthetic. But in the late 90s, with overprescription of opioid pain medication, addiction spread and it started creeping into the illegal drug markets. Fentanyl is wholly made up of chemicals, making it much faster to produce than heroin and just about 1/10 of the cost. That and its powerful high have made it attractive to dealers who now splice it into other drugs, putting users at risk.
They're getting little bags from dealers who say it's heroin, and it might be a fentanyl analog, only a fentanyl analog, nothing else in there. The person who's buying has no idea what they're getting. I mean, they just don't. Sometimes the sellers know what it is, sometimes they don't.
Prince is perhaps the most famous victim of the drug. The singer overdosed in 2016 after taking opioid medication, which was counterfeit and laced with fentanyl. The first appearance of illegal fentanyl on the U.S. market leads back to China. It's still the main source of the precursor chemicals needed to make the drug, but since 2005, most production has shifted to Mexico. DEA Special Agent Ray Donovan spent years tracking infamous drug lord El Chapo and his Sinaloa cartel. They started adding fentanyl to their heroin around 2011.
Their heroin, the main heroin that was being produced in Mexico, wasn't as strong as Colombian heroin, right? So they wanted it to be much more stronger, so they started adding the fentanyl to the heroin to make it stronger, to push it into the United States.
Just a kilo of illegal fentanyl can generate at least $1.5 million of revenue in America, according to the DEA. Authorities say most of it makes its way through legal ports of entry, cut and ready for street sale.
If you're a drug trafficker and you have 100 kilos of heroin or fentanyl, you're going to send multiple cars. You're going to spread out the risk. And understanding that if one car gets taken off, you have many other cars that might get through.
Last year, almost 1,000 kilos of fentanyl and analogs were intercepted, but the flow is hard to stem. For Bridget Brennan, hope lies elsewhere as opioid prescriptions decrease in the U.S.
The way we have traditionally seen most people begin their opioid addiction is through the pills. So if we can close that gate, my hope is that fewer people will become addicted, fewer people will be seeking heroin and fentanyl.
President Donald Trump declared the opioid crisis a public health emergency less than a year after taking office. Under pressure, China has now designated all forms of fentanyl as controlled substances. But its precursors are still legal and eventually make their way to a profitable U.S. market.